Welcome everyone to our True Love Forum Session 2. Today's topic is relationship. Before I go into our three main questions that we're going to be asking, I want to establish very shortly but succinctly our three principles of our True Love Forum. The first and foremost, it's that judgment and cowardice disqualifies us. If you have judgment in your hearts or you have fear on your lips, then that's a reason to step back. I really hope that we do not allow any words to fall to the ground, but we truly commit every word that we say to be spirit-filled, to come from conviction, to come from courage, and to come from love, right? That's our prayer. And so, again, I know the call of Samuel is not easy for us, but that we may commit to knowing that our words are meaningful, it's powerful, and we pray that we may believe in such. Number two, the Christian way does not throw away one of these pillars for the other. Like, for example, our forum is called True Love Forum. For the sake of truth, we do not throw away love. Sometimes the quickest way to speak is one devoid of love. And that's the natural inclination of people. And yet that is not the way of a Christian. When you have truth that's burning in your heart and you do not have love that anchors it, then it will burn you first before you burn someone with your words and your lips, right? For the sake of truth, we cannot sacrifice love, but also for the sake of love, we cannot sacrifice truth. And number three, all of this is good, but if the execution or the fruit of what we say is not so, then that's where we have dropped the ball. So we must express our opinions in a Christ-like manner, right? We are not here to argue. We are not here to fight. We are here to be encouraged and edified. We're here to think from a point that the opposite party has said. And through that, I'm hoping, because there is going to be validity on both sides, that we will be able to make more holistic these understandings of these topics that are very, very important in our life. Very pertinent and very applicable to each and every one of us. So to my right, we see, number one, honoring your parents means you must obey their wishes and advice, even if you strongly disagree with their thinking. Okay? Stance number two is honoring your parents means showing them respect, but you should still make your own life decisions based on what you think is right.
So for me, it's important to know what means honor. And from a biblical point, I think that honor means to add value to something or to someone, which means that you act to them like very respectfully, with gratitude, and taking in considerations their opinions. But it doesn't mean like you have to obey. For example, in the Bible also says like, children, you must obey your parents because they are not mature enough to know what is right, what is wrong. So I think that honor, what it means is like, yes, to take in consideration their opinions, show gratitude, but not like obey exactly what they say, because sometimes some of us haven't grown in like Christian families. So sometimes their opinions might be against God or the Christian values. So we need to take in consideration that, I think.
The answers seem to just have the same foundation. No matter what we say, when we are disagreeing with them, it's not because we want to put them to shame or to say we won or they lost. It's to say, with prayerful heart, you get to have discernment and you're making your decision from that, not just solely because you want to be able to disagree with them. So I think that's why some of the points we made are like, parents aren't always right. Sometimes it's because they're making decisions because they want to live vicariously through their children. So they'll make fleshly or selfish decisions and wanting you to carry that out only to satisfy them without thinking of actually your needs. Because when God calls man and woman to come together, it doesn't call for the grandfather and the grandmother or the mother-in-law or the father-in-law. But I feel like in a lot of culture, sometimes we've had a lot of parents use abusive powers or words to force children into a relationship solely out of like obedience or tradition. So that's why I feel like we want to honor by respecting them, but also disagreeing respectfully. Yeah.
I'm going to try to do this as best as I can because I'm the moderator here. I wasn't ready to take a side. I want to establish a few things before we make this argument of honoring our parents. Number one, I don't think we should allow the exception to be the mean. Meaning, I think a lot of us, from what I've overheard, I think a lot of us were talking about examples of results of how not obeying our parents has led to blessings. But I want to ask you a question, right? Because once we start making the exception the mean, we justify the other 9 out of 10 times we have dishonored them just out of selfishness and fleshiness. So I think we have to be very careful to make points of what we believe in based on results. Second, I think we need to ask the question, are we making these decisions based on our experience or based on truth or what the Bible says? Because there are passages in the Bible, especially Colossians 3:20, that says, children, obey your parents in everything, for it pleases the Lord. If not anything else, you should have parsed that passage. If not anything else, in your opening argument, you should have discussed that passage. I want to add to a little bit of what Carolina has said about the example of, honoring your father and mother when we are children, we don't know better. But stepping back from the moderator and just taking the stance of just even a pastor that believes the best in people still, I want to caution carefully before we think that we are that mature. I think many of us lack the capacity to fully distinguish what is right and wrong. And so I guess there's few things I want to call out that is good about our parents. First, our parents are not perfect, but we only weaponize this for how they treat us and not how we treat them. When we say our parents are not perfect, it's about what they did to us, what they said to us, what mistakes they've made to us, instead of having a holistic understanding of that meaning, which is our parents are finite. As we are now adults, all of us are adults here, our parents are broken people. That means they deserve our grace, right? But we, as human beings, even as people that call ourselves Christians, we only think about what we endured. 2, it's true, your parents has raised you based on their life, the things that really didn't work and the things that really worked. And so in turn, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it is an indisputable fact that they are more experienced than us. 3, even though our parents did not express it to us, and maybe they're flawed, our parents want the best for us, of which God knows our parents' faults. And yet, God also said for us to honor our parents. It is true that our parents will always be word for us, right? And they will always see us as babies until we definitely show them otherwise. And yet, I don't know how many of us earned the respect of our parents. And so I guess not from, I wouldn't even say I disagree with you principle-wise, but I don't know if us sitting in this room, even myself, mind you, and I'm much older than many of us here, are qualified to say we are honoring our parents, we are showing them respect, and that we can even begin to say we are making decisions based on what is right, not based on what we think is right.
When we say, are we making decisions based on experiences or biblical truth? I think that's a question we can continuously ask, and we can go back and forth regarding that, because many of us, when we made our claims with regards to honoring our parents by respecting them, but admitting that because they are flawed humans, which would also mean that we also are flawed, but we're also admitting that at times we're able to see at times that they are not making decisions based on biblical truth. In those stances, we're saying we go against them when it comes to that. Does not mean that we're always right. So we still stay on that line of saying, in terms of when we are able to open our eyes and be objective, we disagree with our parents, and that's why we will not obey them, but we will honor them by respecting them, just not to put them to shame.
How would you reconcile Colossians 3:20?
The way I was told when reading the Bible is that we read what the audience is that the Bible is being written to. At times, the Bible is descriptive, and at times it's prescriptive. Here, I believe we can say this book itself can be both descriptive and prescriptive, but I would like to stake the claim that in this context, it is being descriptive because it was addressed to a people, a church at the time. And when it says, okay, children, obey your parents in everything, if we were to use the context of relationship, and we want to use an example where maybe parents are trying to force you to have a spouse.
Okay, so I don't know if it's completely different with different translations, but I know this has rules for Christian households. And with the verse, children, obey your parents and everything, for this pleases the Lord. I believe this is obey anything that your parents are saying that pleases the Lord. So in that regard, I'm like, yeah, like obey your parents if it pleases the Lord. If what they're saying is pleasing to God. But if it's not, that's where I think you're smiling. I'm getting nervous.
First of all, thank you for reminding us that we should base our opinions not on just personal experiences, but on truth. And after reading Colossians, it showed me that God is revealing to us through this passage a model behavior or how a godly family works in this passage, how a father should treat the children and how children should treat parents. However, that also led me to think about another passage from the Bible, from Luke chapter 14, verse 26, where Jesus says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." I'm reminded of this verse because within the passage of Colossians, God is showing us the model behavior or model family which He has designed. And I believe that God does not bring chaos, but God brings order in chaos. And that model surely displays what order looks like in family. And I do agree that it is best for children to also obey. However, I sense there is tension when Jesus says you must also hate your own life, but also father and mother. And I'm interpreting this verse as in also establishing an order between family and God. The point I am not fully convinced by must obey is that our parents are not God. Even though God does place our parents with His divine intervention and with His divine plan, and they give our parents the authority to rule the family and raise us and mature us. However, they themselves are not God. And as you mentioned, they also come from broken families. And I think what Jesus wants to help us remember is that we shouldn't place our parents as gods. Remember the family order, but follow Jesus as the Lord of our lives. And by truly following that, and I hope that if everyone within the family strives to follow that order of placing Jesus, placing God, our calling as disciples first, the order of the family, the model family which God has created, can truly bring harmony and healing within the family.
Okay, so let me bring this together. So I think in Colossians 3, verse 23, it's key to understanding these points. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And verse 24, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, you are serving the Lord Christ. So pretty much there's few layers to this. Number one, as many of you guys have talked about, where Jesus says, like, to follow me, you must die to yourself. You must die to a lot of the worldly mores and things like that. Like, at the principle of it, we are reinstating and restoring what it means to have lordship, Jesus as Lord. Okay, that's first. That's what it means to be a Christian, right? In the meta view, that's the main thing that we first have to establish. Jesus is the Lord of our life. But within that, it's very clear there is this tension. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. So there's a term that I used, especially when I used to do youth ministry, and I had a lot of students whose parents were not Christian who would threaten their kids by saying, if you don't get straight A's, you can't go to church, right? And even Christian parents said that. It was a really heartbreaking thing, right? And so within this context, how do you navigate this? So I think we got to go back to what I've established. So this is an indisputable fact. As a parent myself, and having observed my parents and thousands of parents, there is no parent that doesn't want their child to do well, right? But what I've already established, most parents that are not biblically sound can only assume the best path forward from what they've seen in life or what they've been educated by. So let's think about that. Okay, number one, they want the best for us, but all they know is the best that they've seen. And so the only way we change their perspective is to show them better. And that's the call of honoring our parents. The only way you transform someone's heart, especially, like we saw like slavery in the States and segregation, right? He said Martin Luther King Jr., right? How his main principle was nonviolent protest, right? Through all the hosing in Birmingham, right? Through all the attacks of the dogs and whatever it may be, they stood strong and protested in love. I still see in some of us immaturity in the fact that when we say this, like obeying God is more important than listening to our parents, there's a sense of, yes, that we need to die to. Because your role is to love your parents, no matter what. It's not just because they've had you, not because they've sacrificed so much for you. The fact that they're your parents, that they're so central and close to you in life, that is an important imperative that we must have to love them by honoring them. That is the way we love them. And so what I would say is, practically speaking, we don't even have the capacity and the right to say this, to make our decisions based on what we think is right until we've lived the right way, which means cleaning up our room, which means listening to them when it doesn't neck us. Because most of the things, it's small. Actually, it's like a life issue, right? It's not a principal faith issue. And from there, by how we show Christ, as a parent myself, I am open to being wrong. Like, the greatest joy is when I see something in my children that I didn't know was there. I could only say this as a parent, right? And that brings me the greatest joy. And your parents are waiting, actually, for what you say to prove them wrong. They want you to show them what you have said you are living for. But if we really pull back the veil, all of us, we lack so much, and I'm included, when it comes to being a Christian and a Christ follower in their household. So I agree with this point. But we cannot celebrate before we are qualified. And it begins with God has commanded, what Jesus has commanded us. Obey your parents. Honor your parents. Especially when the disagreements are personal. Especially when the disagreements are selfish, for selfish reasons. And so those are just some things that I really am asking us to think. Let's think of that word. What does it mean to love our parents? It means to honor them. And how can we honor them? It's really having Christ's heart for them. That begins everything. And it will actually change our parents' hearts. I'll give you a final example. So my father, for the longest time, he wanted me to serve in a ministry that will help me when it comes to ministry. He told me I was in the junior high ministry for too long, because number one, The cycle of junior high ministry is 2 years. So I'm like discipling people for 2 years and they graduate. There used to be a phrase in our church that junior high was a furnace and the high school group was a fire extinguisher. Like, it made me sad that people were saying that, but two, it made me so like limited in the ministry that I was doing. So obviously I should have listened to my dad. This was just like something that seems like easier to listen to because it's for my benefit. But in this, I told my father, like, could you give me some time to pray and fast? Can you give me some time to meditate on this? Because I love you, Dad, and I know you wish the best for me. And when I was able to give a reason to my father that was selfless and spirit-led, he didn't say anything else. If he kept on pushing, I would have obeyed. Actually, I would have. But in that context, I really had faith that the Lord will allow whatever he willed to be accomplished through a conversation. There are seasons that we got to step back, whether it benefits us or not. But I'm only here because, as I said, the process, making decisions not based on what is beneficial, but what pleases God's heart. Okay, this is topic number 2, the reason for being single. If a person remains single for a long time, it's often because of their own lack of effort or flaws in their character, appearance that they need to fix. Point number 2, if a person remains single for a long time, it's because God has not opened the door yet, regardless of their effort and character. For topic number 2, point number 1 will go first.
So what we talked about is you need effort, right? You need to put effort into your character, whether it's appearance or just stuff. But it might sound worldly, but we kind of put it into like the spiritual aspect where I feel like you can't go to heaven if you just say, oh, I'm a Christian, right? But I feel like this is what it's kind of saying too. It's like, oh, I'm good looking. I'm well. Then that doesn't mean someone's gonna come, right? I feel like you have to put effort. Even in as a Christian, you need to, fast, pray, worship. There's like commandments you have to keep. But then I feel like that's a part of building up a character and putting effort into yourself. So we kind of implemented that aspect into the single life.
First, I think all of us could agree that, yes, that is correct. Like, we need to do something about it. We can't just be like locked up in our room, not putting ourselves out there, not taking care of how we look. We need to do that. But with our statement, the part that gets us is the regardless. Like, regardless of the effort in our character, what matters is when God opens that door for us to like get into a relationship. And so that's where we're at with the regardless.
We're taking this stance not just solely from the point of view of like we shouldn't do anything. We believe that we actually have to do things if we are desiring partnership and don't want to remain single. But I'm also staying on this side because oftentimes I think in society, when we're measuring singleness or singlehood or being partnered up, we see singleness as something to be fixed, where we see someone who's single and we say pity or woe to them. But there's 2 points to this. One, singleness is not something to be fixed. When we're looking at someone, perhaps they're meant to remain in that title, in that singleness, because that is where God wants to use them for his ministry and for just what God is calling them to do. But when we're just seeing them as someone who's single, we see them as someone to be pitied first. And secondly, the reason why we're here, and when she opened the sentence, when she said, we actually totally believe with everything that was said on that side, plus more, is because we said, this says, God, right? God doesn't let it happen regardless of everything you've done. So regardless of all those efforts that you've put into it, God is still not saying yes to it. Because at the end of the day, nothing happens without God say so. That's why we're on this side.
Well said. Well said. But there's one question and one part that we kind of talked about too. How do you know what door God will open for you? How do you discern that? And let's say if you have that own discernment, there would be lots of missed opportunities as well. If you, let's say, misjudged an opportunity, right? So that was the question we were stuck in. It's like, oh, then what is the open door? What is that right door God has opened for us? So I feel like with opportunity, you go out there, right? You sometimes fail, but you sometimes grab the opportunity as well, right? So that's where we were like, right? Even though it's not an opportunity, go for it, right? If it's a no, it's a no. But if it's a yes,
Can I ask a question for both of you guys to kind of continue this conversation? So, what do we say about those that seemingly many doors have been opened to, and those that no doors are open to?
I think there's a lot of people that the doors are open to, but I think those people aren't using wisdom when they're deciding on who their partner should be, which is why so many times they'll just accept anything that comes their way. Whereas the other people that don't have as many doors open, maybe they're a little bit more discerning and a little bit more wise when it comes to dating, which is why they're taking a little slower.
I'm hesitant to answer this question, not because I don't want it to seem like when we're answering, we're making it like seem like we're being defensive, because I get stumbled with this when it comes to even talking about faith. So oftentimes people say, why do I have to believe God? They have all they desire in the world, right? Right? Because you're saying, why is it such that God opens doors for so many people, so many doors for certain people and none for others? That's such a very testy and scary territory to be entering, because I don't know the heart of God. Job was such a great man, yet, but if we're just using surface level measurement of like, look at all the disappointment and the failures that he faced, then we're sitting there like, God must have hated him. And yet, Bibles preach totally against that. So I'm worried to answer that question solely because I don't know God's heart.
So if there's no doors open, I would say if you had put in all the efforts, then it is God just saying no for now, at least. And if many doors are open, then I guess you put in a lot of effort and God is saying yes, to put it simply. But I would just make sure that those doors are actually aligned with what God wants. Yeah, just because you have a lot of doors open for you to walk through doesn't mean you should just be like, okay, yes to everything. Yeah.
Ecclesiastes 3:1, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. So the reason in terms of when you were talking about many doors, there are times even people who many doors open for, yet are not securely in relationships right now. Perhaps it was not the right timing for them as well. So they never opened or never fully opened the door and went through the door.
I really respect your opinion about focusing on the point of the word regardless, because yes, it emphasizes how your focus should be only shifted onto God and the faith. But when you get too deep on the word regardless, it would make you at the end of the day justified the regardless of the effort, because that will lead you to just remaining on the same situation. And as Hijo mentioned, the similar point on the first question of making an exception to you would end up making an exception, making yourself justified the situation that you are in. And the point where it talks about God has not opened the door yet is also mentioning how you are just remaining on that. And you also mentioned, like, since we don't know his heart, we wouldn't know like who has a lot of doors or like little doors opened. I do agree on that, because that is true. We won't ever get to know, but we would have to keep on pursue and seek for truth that he wants to reveal to you, but with the effort, not thinking about regardless of the situation. Even though this didn't work, I would just like remain on the same situation.
I'd say our point is we're not denigrating the effort. Our focus is more on God's sovereignty and God's providence. So within the big picture of trusting God's own timing and waiting for his perfect timing, we're not denigrating human efforts at all. I think in the process of sanctification, whether we're married or not, whether we're pursuing someone or not, I think we need to look at our flaws every single day, repent, and trust alone in Jesus Christ. That should be the the whole process of sanctification. So within the trusting God's providence, I think our focus is more on the providence, more on God. We're not just making excuses for on not making efforts, but we're focusing on God at the same time.
So if there is a spectrum, we will be closer to you than to whatever your understanding of the word regardless is that we're not sitting and not doing anything. We're saying, in addition to God, submitting to God's sovereignty because nothing is going to happen without him, we are also trying in our own minute human effort. We look good. We try, we socialize, we interact, but we do not trust and believe that solely our human efforts will redeem us. We're surrendering that I'm trying here because I'm not going to sit in a hole and expect a man to find me, but saying I will do the thing that is within my capability, but knowing that whether it happens or not, it's all to God's glory. That's the
And if you're
regardless.
sitting at home and a random man finds you, that's a dangerous situation.
I feel like the impossible is possible too. Like, there's people that have crazy stories where they're only in their room, they don't do anything. All they do is go to work and come back to home, and then they find love. What I'm saying is, like, yes, you should put in effort, but there are times where God is like, okay, you're not gonna do anything, then here you go. I feel like rare, but I do think it can happen.
Let me kind of wrap this up with some passages, but before that, I want to kind of talk about looking at the anchor of each point. And what is the title here? Reason we are single. So there's two key things that we have to clarify. The reason of singlehood. So first, we got to look at what singlehood means, because I want to establish something first for every single one of us that are Christian. From Hosea 2:19 through 20, it says this: I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice. In steadfast love and in mercy, I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. The first point I want to make is once we're Christian, we're all his. So the big aspect of singleness is already answered for. We are all now the bride, and he is the bridegroom. Okay, so let's first establish that from a spiritual standpoint, none of us are single. We have been united with Christ. And for men, we have to learn submission to Christ. That we are now worthy of being followed by whoever it is that God might being the operative word, called us to lead, right? So first, I want to say, I think we have to reassess what we think about singlehood and how much we derive our worth from singlehood, from dating, from marriage. Because I want to be very clear. I established this first point very deeply in my heart. That as a single, it actually didn't matter. And as when I dated, it didn't really matter. And when I was married, it didn't really matter when it came to my identity. Because actually, most of the world has already established a certain viewpoint of us based on our status, right? When we talk about doors, right? Reason why we're single. Let's look at the reason why many people date. Many people would date red flags, precarious situations by forcing the issue because they just don't want to be single. So just because you've opened a lot of doors by yourself doesn't mean that's God's will. Not to say that's what happened with our relationship for those who are in relationship right now, but we need to establish that second point. Just because you're dating doesn't mean God favors you. And just because you're single, it doesn't mean God favors you. Even though we have to think about 1 Corinthians 7:9, right? Like where Paul says, to remain single, it is good. But those who cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. So majority of us should get married to resist the temptation of sin. Then what is marriage? What is the purpose of dating? Like, is this the goal? Is this the final boss of relationship? No. It's a medium, right? It's a medium of holiness. I remember my mentor he told me in seminary that marriage is the crucible of sanctification. It is the place by which we are forced to grow. It is a place by which we become selfless. And so in turn, actually, a point that's really true is a lot of people are single because they're selfish. A lot of Korea does not want to get married because they're selfish. You know, this is something that we have to reconcile as well. And so singleness doesn't define us. Being in a relationship does not define us. Christ has already defined us as his. And so if we're looking at what we need to highlight, it's looking at, right, celibacy might be the call of some people. But I will say this about God. And from what as you guys know, I counsel a lot, but one of the main things I counsel through is relationships. A lot of times, God puts us through relationship to make us more selfless. And sometimes God draws us out of relationship because we're selfish, especially when both are selfish. Then you cannot stay in a relationship and please God. And so the question is not, why am I not in a relationship? The question is, in whatever state that I am I genuinely content, again, being his? And from there, the overflow of having the spiritual eyes of whether I'm called to relationship right now or not will come to play. And so those are just some food for thought. Again, that singleness, I really pray that we may not think it's just a season, nor a status that we want to be absolved of, but rather the gospel states what? We are being united with Christ truly when we receive salvation. And only when we really understand this, he reveals our weaknesses and loves us still. It will change our identity and security, and this will lead us to be the best husband if we're called to be a husband, best wife if we're called to be a wife, and we will love the other as we've been loved first by Christ. Like, I'm telling you, if you feel like you need to change or make an effort, especially with certain character things and appearance things that is not coming from the conviction of the Holy Spirit, you are seeking a short-term fix for a problem that is not going to be resolved. Because whoever you're trying to be yoked with, you guys will not be at the same spiritual wavelength. So now we're in our final topic. Topic number 3. It's about finding a partner. So finding a partner requires active effort. Prayer alone is not enough. This seems like it's similar to the last question, but let's go deeper into this to talk about some key points that are made here. We should diligently use dating apps or blind dates as a responsible way to search while praying. Point number 2, finding a spouse requires active effort. To trust in God's timing, we should avoid forcing outcomes through human means. Instead, wait quietly for the right person to appear.
I think first we want to start by defining 2 words that we felt like might be confusing to people. So we hope to convince and not confuse you by explaining those 2 words. First, the moderator brought to our attention that when you read the word active in explaining our statement, that it might be contradictory in nature. So we want to explain a little to show why it's not contradictory at all. So oftentimes when we have people who are nominal Christians, for example, something I used to be a member of, where I surrender, and I like to believe that, I surrender to God's timing in all things that I do, but what I do in that regard is by not doing anything at all. Just saying, in God's timing, everything will work out. That means me not praying, not even going to God about anything. To me, that's passive, right? So being active in our regard does not mean we're taking sovereignty away from God. It means in our regard as true Christians, going to our war room, praying about the desires of our hearts, fasting and praying diligently, that's active, but not active in the eyes of the world. Like going out to the clubs and putting ourselves in proximity to but not in that regard at all. So that's the first definition. And then when we talk about partner, we're not trying to date for the sake of dating because we don't want to be single. We're not dating because we just date from one part. When we think of partner, we think of godly husband, godly wife, regardless of whatever your gender may be. And we're dating for the sake of godly marriage, Christian household. Those are the two key definitions I want to explain, first of all, and then our explanations will stem from that.
So finding a spouse, we're focusing on God's providence and His timing. That does not mean that we're not out doing anything. We're not just lounging around and doing nothing. But again, it might look passive in the eyes of the world, like we're like using dating apps and asking for blind dates for etc. But because we are looking for a godly man or godly woman, I say we should not try to force it through human effort, but should wait quietly for God to bring the right person naturally. So right person meaning Christian, godly men or women. And waiting quietly does not mean that we're just doing nothing, but surrendering our fleshly, worldly desires. We're not dating because we want to solve our loneliness or anything like that, but we want to glorify through our relationship. So waiting quietly means that we're serving in God. We're just going to where all the godly men and women are and serving side by side in NSC.
I feel like here, it's really the heart posture. I feel like using dating apps or asking for a blind date is not wrong. It's how you use it, right? We kind of talked about generational change as well. I feel like we are in a generation of, media and sometimes it is hard to meet people, so I feel like it is a way. And one of our biggest point is that even in NSC, we are encouraged. We're not just here to listen about the scripture, but we're here to put it into action, right? So I feel like we're not forcing it, but we're actually trying to go out. I think it's a part of training too, right? A training to discern, right? To know what's right and wrong. And you might ask, well, how do you know what's right and wrong? We're praying, right? If people who are genuinely praying, I feel like we can be more wise with our decisions. We can have a better judgment of what's right and wrong if we're actually genuinely praying. So I feel like that word prayer in our point is really powerful in the whole aspect of our point. Because prayer comes to heart posture, and heart posture comes to discernment. So I feel like that was our biggest point.
I say we're not necessarily disagreeing with you. We agree heart posture is important. That's why I said that waiting quietly means you surrendering our desires, just waiting for God's own timing. That entails praying. But at the same time, we do not want unnecessary dramas and hurts. But I say using like dating apps and blind dates, mostly people are using those methods because they just want to easy way to find the partner.
Just to add to that, there are stories of successful marriages even for people in the world, for people in the church who happen to just meet online. No shame to them whatsoever. Like, I totally do not disparage how they met their partners that way. But even there are people in the world who oftentimes would say negative things about the use of social media and dating apps, because the mindset of those who come there is often not for like quality relationship. It's known for hookup culture, dating apps. Now, blind dates might be different. Like when I go on my knees to pray to God and I say, God, help me with so and so. And then I say, I'm also going to sign up for the dating apps. It throws out the old concept of providence and like God's timing and whatnot, because then you're going there and it looks like I'm shopping for shoes and I get to swipe left and right. No, but truly, because then what characteristics am I looking at to judge, right? I'm looking at, is it good looking enough? Does he have six pack? There's no way I'm seeing how he lives out his godly or Christian life by looking at his pictures, if we're being honest with one another. And I'm guilty of this. I've used these apps before. There's nothing godly about using dating apps, and that's the ground we're sticking with.
Well, yes, a lot of people use dating apps with different pleasures, as you guys mentioned, but we've personally seen a lot of people get married through dating apps that are Christians, and she even mentioned there was a pastor that got married through a dating app, right? So I feel like Helen kind of mentioned about unnecessary drama, but I feel like there are unnecessary drama everywhere.
What I want to emphasize is people who pray, like who really genuinely pray, will have the discernment and will have trust in God. So I know that they would make wise decisions. Either they use something else or just not do anything. So in this part of the statement, the part I want to emphasize is that they are still praying and is still in the process of praying. We did mention that dating apps or blind dates is kind of a modern tool that people use these days. And the reason that we agree with the usage of the tools is because using tool while praying is not like forcing God's will and one of our desire. It's just trying to get the direction because we're still praying while using that. Yeah, that's my point.
I just wanted to touch upon, I think Pito said about praying before, embarking in a relationship, right? It's not completely about that, but I just wanted to touch on that. So I think with dating apps, the main point is not to get to know that person. Being on a dating app means that, I'm going to date this person. So the focus becomes basically dating them or becoming in a relationship. And so I would think there would be less time to get to know their character just as a person, where they're not, trying to win you over or trying to become in a relationship. So in the context of church, like Pito said, that would be serving together in a church together where, you share the same, I like to say spiritual DNA, as you learn in the church, as you hear the same sermons. But I think, I think for me, getting to know that person, getting to know that character first, praying about them and seeing if they would be a good fit, and then getting that conviction and then dating would be better than getting to know them in the context of, I might potentially date them. And although you could do them simultaneously, I think it would be a little bit more difficult than getting to know them platonically and just between two people rather than a potential partner.
I've never known anyone who uses dating apps and just chose one person and they were just talking to one person for how long they're using the dating app for. This means they are chatting with many people, communicating with many people, trying to find potential partner, what you like the most, almost like a market. So when you're dating in church diligently, courting someone, learning about their characteristics before you actually chose them, you're focusing on one person, praying diligently about them, consulting your pastors in leadership about that. So I think dating does not mutually coexist with Christian life.
Okay, for the lack of time, let me kind of sum up your points and more importantly, kind of frame this with the current climate of Christian dating. So actually, even at our church, even when I'm preaching, but especially when I'm not preaching and observing our church members, I already see, obviously, the natural scanning that happens. Right? I want to talk about two blind spots of the church. So I used to be at a big church for most of my ministry. And this is an actual an epidemic that's happening in big churches. That most of the people that come to big churches are not disciples. Right? They're just seekers looking just for someone with the title Christian that they're attracted to. But the second camp are the people that have self-righteousness, that believe God has prepared for them a special man or woman, that in God's timing, without any of their effort, God has planned for them. And so they become bitter as time passes, as they serve, as they give, as they're part of a community. They say, why has God allowed me to be in this situation? Right, that's a real thing. And I was doing ministry, late 30s ministry, with a bunch of people that asked me that question. That it was very, very hard for me, that did not yet have that trust built, that could not answer the question until the end of that year. Right? So we got to kind of establish these two things. I would answer this with a very clear way to delineate this. I think this should be the mindset of the men in the church. I think the problem with most Christian men are they are cowards. Not to justify the women that are way too proactive, but the men in the church, especially the Christian, the spiritually mature men, are cowards. And I'm only saying this because I'm a man. I have to say this only to men. I can't say this particularly to women because I'm not a woman. But the truth is, like, guys in this generation, Christian or not, they want all things guaranteed. They ask the friends, like, is she interested? Like, no. Like, if you need all the guarantees for something, what different is that than dating apps? Where there's no pressure and you are confirmed that someone swiped. I don't even know which way you swipe because I don't know. Is it left or right? Right is approval? Right is good. Okay, right is good. So I think Christian men have to take a page into being diligent in seeing the prayers answered. Christian women have to have more faith a lot of times. And again, this is not talking about the blind spot of the Christian women that are completely passive and just expecting God to drop a man out of heaven, right? And so I think some women have to have more patience. And the truth of the matter is sometimes we feel hopeless. Like if we don't see potentials, right? But I think that's also pride. or unhealthy standards. Like, I think already, and see how Gentile was to the woman compared to the man, right? But it's true. It is true. I think, and not only women, but also men, right? Because I'm a Christian man, right? Like when I hear Christian men talk, when there's a newcomer, like new woman, they're like, oh, it's new, like it. SMH. So back to the point. So both points after establishing what the reality of the things are and what we need to really challenge ourselves to do more, let's go back to the basics and let's go back to the crux of how we make this, how we work, how we strive to find our partner, right? Which is prayer, right? I think both of the parties agree with prayer. That prayer must be center, prayer must be forefront, and there is a correct order of operations to do things. And that's why what I alluded to a little bit in our last point is very important. The most important thing, even before dating, even before finding a partner, in our relationship with God, that we need to commit to is that we are not informing God, but we are confirming with God. And I know that most of us still inform God by how you tell the church your decisions. Because if Christ is the head, then you are part of the body, right? That you submit. But most people, they have something, a rebellious part of their hearts that say, no, the church doesn't need to know. Like, it's my right. It's my prerogative. Why is the church, I don't need to tell the church. I don't need to tell, and that is actually comes from the fact that I don't need to ask God. And what actually happens that's very toxic is we inform God of our prayer and we want him to confirm it for us. It's not us confirming with God. We want him to confirm and we try to strong arm him spiritually by after informing him, then fasting, then getting on our knees, then crying out to him with no other options in mind, not only with the decisions, but with that man or with that woman. And that is a tragedy. That is a tragedy because we have not started to pray correctly. Because I will say this, if you actually pray where you involve God in your prayer, when you really allow him to minister to you while you're praying, which is imagine how life will be different if actually we allow the Holy Spirit to speak to us before we make decisions. Like, how different will your life and my life be? When you do that, one thing that I've seen in my life, this is my testimony, is my 100 points of who my future wife's gonna be got cut down to 3. And the 3 did not come from me. It came from how God wrecked me and said, this is what you need. And he showed me what I should desire. That's first. I think too many of us have a watered down selfish, worldly standard that even if we go on dating apps with the right intention of prayer, we don't have the right eyes to see what criteria we should have. Right? Because already I do agree with you. The standard of the dating app, the algorithm, the way they kind of bring people together is a very worldly way, right? Not to say that is bad, because I've married off people that went on dating apps before. So I'm not saying it is not something we do, but we have to start with what prayer actually is. And I think once you are able to clarify his heart for you, this is who you are. This is how you can truly multiply your capacity after being married. This is what will help you thrive. And saying, yes, Lord. Then your standards will change. Your spiritual eyes will become open. And this is where you guys say, when you run the race together, you'll start to see, because that's my testimony. I actually thought I'm very black and white. I thought I was celibate because I thought there was just no one that had the radical obedience until my father said, the people that have stuck by your side all this time, that speaks volumes. Because you're crazy. Like, you're not a normal person. And so start looking there, because what God values in you is perseverance. My call is to help people who have given up on themselves, not to give up on them, right? And so that's one of the main tenets of my ministry. And so whoever I'm married to cannot give up, regardless of anything. But for me to realize that, it took a lot of prayer first to clarify my heart. So how do we pray? That's the first thing we have to confirm. Like, are we confirming with God, or are we informing him? And once we start confirming with him, then what does it mean to find our partner? It's like this. So I personally believe that every encounter that we have is a divine encounter, is a kairos. That God has placed people in our life, some to become family, and some even that could become our significant other. Right? But we need to first value the relationships that we have. And from there, who knows? This is where blind dates, the healthy type of blind dates are the ones that love you, that know not what you desire, but what you need, right? That's why as I said, I've set up people before. I've very rarely set people up. I set 2 people up. Both of them are married, right? But it's very, very rare when I set someone up, because for me, I pray at least 100 days before I set one up. Like with everything that I do in life, right? And so, I think there's something about once we have prayed, once we start believing in what the Bible says, right? That when God, as we say, when we look at certain meetings in the Bible of people coming together, it says kairos, which is different than the chronos, right? Just time by itself is God intervening in time. Once we have that kind of frame in mind, then we can start opening our eyes to the fact that this is what it means to be active. Okay, God, I'm privy to this journey that you are calling me to walk. And while we're walking, because we're starting to look at these relationships as a divinely given to us, and we're walking on this journey together, we start to see meaning behind the things that we do together. And you start seeing God put the puzzle pieces of your life bit by bit, part by part. And at one point of your life, you might see a picture of someone in your life that God has revealed, whether it's that person pursuing you and through prayer you find peace, or whether you get the peace to pursue someone. I will say everyone's different, right? Everyone's situation is different. But I think what we really do need to establish is, with both of these points, I'm going to sum it up again. The approach of a man, Christian man, should be different than a Christian woman. I think both requires faith, right? Both requires courage. This is a courage of the fear of not finding someone. Here is the courage of being rejected and still being in the same church, right? That's tough. Right? And so I think in both, there is that attitude of faith that is required in whatever attitude we take. Again, not to say as a woman we cannot approach someone, right? Just as Ruth approached Boaz, right? That's something that I'm not saying is set in stone. Oh, I'm not being prophetic. I was pointing to this side because y'all brought up Ruth, but I realized I was pointing at Ruth at that time. But with those things in mind, one thing I've said since the beginning of our relationship together, but I will say again, you need to believe, like for whatever the fruits are, you and I really need to believe in the power of prayer and what God reveals to us. And I think the reason why we don't have enough faith is we don't actually pray. Remember, I always say this. Most of the people that come to me say, Pedro, I've been praying so much that God is not answering. By talking to them about their prayer life, we could confirm that they haven't prayed. No, it's real. Like even last Wednesday when we were talking about, like even by the way people talk about prayer, you could really understand what they know about prayer, right? And so I hope that this is a time that we have a lot of spiritual food for thought, but a lot of things to reflect on. As we said, there's a lot of topics that we can talk about, but I pray that today you are edified and encouraged, even despite, again, I will say this, in lack, it's when I'm the most encouraged, because I know that if I just put my faith in Him, the things that I've held on to by myself, like, it's like just letting that go is actually one of the most like peace-giving things in someone's life. Like things that we're like clenching onto, learning to, unwrap our hands. And that's the first step for many of us. And so that's my prayer for us.